Hello, Anthurium lovers. This is my wife, Janine.
Hi, friends.
What's that behind you there?
Anthurium moraquinum, also known as the Queen Anthurium.
It's been 1 year since my last update, and I want to share with you how the plants have changed after going from a 2-gallon to a 6-gallon pot. Go ahead and show them the 2-gallon pot right there, and the current pot, 6-gallon pot. What's the problem with the 6-gallon pot?
It's heavy.
Yeah, it's very heavy to lug this plant around, especially after you've watered it. Go ahead and pick up the plant so we can see what it looks like, Janine. There we go. What a gorgeous plant, isn't it?
It's a very happy, heavy queen.
Yeah, beautiful plant. Okay, Janine, you can go ahead and put it back. So a year ago in the 2-gallon pot, the longest leaf I had was 37 inches. Let's go ahead and measure this leaf and see how long it is, Janine.
42.
Wow, 42 inches. That is really long. So this plant is definitely bigger in the 6-gallon pot versus the 2-gallon pot. Here's a close-up of the Queen Anthurium's root system. As you know, Queen Anthuriums grow upward, so they do need a moss pole. Last summer, I took a 2-gallon pot and I cut the bottom out of it. Then I stuck it on top of the 6-gallon pot, and then I filled this with sphagnum moss and grow stone. Since then, I've had wonderful root growth in this 2-gallon moss pole. But since then, as you can see here, the plant has grown out of the 2-gallon moss pole, and it needs more sphagnum moss here. Now, one option is I could extend this moss pole up to here with another 2-gallon pot. But the other option I'm considering is cutting the bottom 6 inches off of this plant and lowering the whole plant down lower. The reason I would do that is that this plant is becoming too tall. It's getting closer to my grow lights, and it's becoming harder to manage. Let's look back and see how this queen has grown over the past 3 years. Here's the plant when I first got it. The leaves are only 2 to 3 inches tall. Here it is 2 years ago in a 1-gallon pot, a much bigger plant. And then here it is last year in a 2-gallon pot, a very beautiful plant with really large leaves. The longest leaf was 37 inches. Then here it is today in a 6-gallon pot with even larger leaves. Here's the newest queen leaf growing out. Wow, it's so beautiful with the velvet texture, just amazing. My question to you Anthurium growers is, has anyone grown a leaf longer than 42 inches that my wife measured on this plant? Because I'm wondering if this is the longest leaf ever grown in a home environment and not a greenhouse. Let me know in the comments section if you know of anyone that's grown a leaf longer than 42 inches in their home. Hey Janine, what do we have there?
Anthurium veitchii, also known as the King Anthurium.
I believe this plant had the most growth after going from a 2-gallon to a 5-gallon pot. I really love how these plants don't require a moss pole, so they're easier to grow. Why don't you go ahead and pick it up, Janine, so we can see it. Wow, this is just such a huge plant with so many leaves. Isn't it gorgeous, Janine?
It's stunning.
Yeah, it is stunning. Thanks, you go ahead and put it back. Really gorgeous plant. Really benefits from going in the 6-gallon pot. This is how the king has grown over the past 3 years. Here is the plant when I first got it 3 years ago. The leaves are about 4 inches long. Here it is on the left side of the picture in a 2-gallon pot 2 years ago. And then here it is 1 year ago. I had just transplanted it to a 6-gallon pot, and it was really taking off in growth. And here it is today, after 1 full year of growth in the 6-gallon pot, full of healthy large leaves. What a gorgeous plant. Here's another look at the King Anthurium. I'm not sure I've seen another plant with so many thick leaves. This plant really took off once I put it in the 6-gallon pot. Here's the newest leaf growing out. Just beautiful. Here's a close-up of the base of the plant. And you can see the thick growth structure here. Hey Janine, what do we have here?
Anthurium luxurians.
Yes, this is a gorgeous plant. It has grown much larger in the 6-gallon pot and now has its biggest leaves it's ever grown. Why don't you go ahead and pick up this plant for us? Yeah, you can see how large this plant is. It's just an exceptionally large plant now. Thanks, Janine. Hey Janine, let's measure a leaf for the audience.
21 inches.
So 21 inches, that's how large this leaf is and what you might expect if you get this plant into a 6-gallon pot. Thanks, Janine. Here's the luxurians when I first bought it 3 years ago. The leaf's about 8 inches long. Here's the plant in a 2-gallon pot 2 years ago. And here's the plant 1 year ago in the same 2-gallon pot. The plant is really taking off in terms of new growth. And then here's the plant today in a 6-gallon pot with tons of new leaf growth. What a beautiful plant. Here's a close-up of the luxurians. You can see that it has a very, very thick growth here on top. And also you can see that it's growing upward out of the pot as opposed to the king anthurium, which is staying flat on the pot. Here's a close-up of the newest leaf that's grown. Just amazing. So beautiful. Looks like something out of the Stone Age. This is Anthurium crystallinum, a wonderful plant for the home because it doesn't grow very tall. It has this gorgeous silver veining, as you can see here. I just love this plant. It's also growing in a 6-gallon pot. I've had it in a south-facing window, and I think it's gotten too much light, so I'm going to move it to a different area of my home. Here's a close-up of the silver veining. Here you can see the size of it in the 6-gallon pot. You're probably wondering how I grew these plants so large in a regular home environment in Sacramento, California, which has a low humidity climate. I made a previous video where I went into detail, and I'll put a link to that video in the description below, but I'll give you the basics right now. In terms of my planting mix, I'm using sphagnum moss mixed with growstone. Unfortunately, this growstone is not available anymore, so I switched over to pumice, which is readily available on Amazon. I've also grown plants in your standard aeroid mix and had similar results. In terms of fertilizer, I've been using this MSU formula made by Repot Me. I use a half a teaspoon per gallon, and I fertilize 3 out of 4 weeks. And in terms of pest control, I've been using this Bonide systemic houseplant insect control, and I apply it once every 6 months. No pests on any plants. To get the fastest growth possible, I increased these plants into the next size pot as soon as I felt they were ready. The plants I bought came in a pot this small, and as soon as possible I increased it to the 1-gallon pot, then the 2-gallon pot, and then the 6-gallon pot. These pots are made by Hydrofarm, and they're available on Amazon. And I like them because they have a lot of vent holes. They're square, so they're easy to put together, and they're also pretty to look at. Here's a close-up of the sales sticker. Next, I'd like to talk about water. All the plants get reverse osmosis water. I have these double tanks under my kitchen sink. I fill this 1-gallon container with reverse osmosis water, and then I add my fertilizer. I water twice a week on Sundays and Wednesdays, and on Sundays they're getting the water with fertilizer, and then on Wednesdays they're just getting pure water. I think people tend to underwater these plants. If you have good drainage, it's very hard to overwater them. They live in a rainforest where it rains every day. So I drench them, again on Sundays and Wednesdays, twice a week. They're getting drenched with water. The larger the plant, the more difficult it is to water in the home environment. So I came up with this system to make my life easier. I have a 6-gallon pot here sitting on top of a black tray. The black tray has a hole drilled in it, so the water drains into the 5-gallon bucket below it. And then every so often I drain the water out of the 5-gallon bucket. So I can water these plants without having to move them, which makes my life much easier. Next, I'd like to talk about light. During photosynthesis, plants use water from their roots and carbon dioxide from the air to make glucose and oxygen. This glucose is what powers the plant. I mentioned I water twice a week. Well, you can only water that much if you're using adequate light for photosynthesis to use the water. So a key to my plant growth is that I use LED lights to power photosynthesis. My average power meter reading is 300 to 400. LED lights are a perfect grow light because they have an excellent spectrum and also don't give off much heat. I've used many different brands of light. I don't think it makes that much difference which brand you use. So if you want to grow large anthuriums in your home, you're going to have to use LED lights. I found this floor lamp to be an easy way to give your anthuriums extra light, and it's very easy to adjust. Janine, why don't you show them how you can raise and lower it?
There's one adjustment.
That's one adjustment, and go ahead and show them the other adjustment.
The other adjustment is up here.
Yep, and you can turn it any way you want. And then once you turn the light on, you can see how bright it is. Yep, and then you put an LED light in here, and you've got an excellent way to give your plant some extra light. Thanks, Janine. I'd like to now talk about humidity. I've been growing these plants in my home in Sacramento, California, which has a dry climate. My average home humidity is around 50%, but I've seen as low as 40% and as high as 60%. As you can see right now, it's 47%. I've never grown these plants in an IKEA cabinet or used an humidifier. I just grown them in my home environment. I'd like to expose you to a new term you probably never heard of, which is the term vapor pressure deficit. A plant takes up water through its roots and then evaporates the water through its leaf stomata. Water tends to move from a wet area, an anthurium leaf, to a dry area, which is your environment. Vapor pressure deficit is the difference between the vapor pressure of your plant and the surrounding air vapor pressure. A normal vapor pressure deficit would be 0.8 to 1.2. The higher the vapor pressure deficit, the more it has a drying effect on your plant. Here's a vapor pressure deficit chart. The important piece of the puzzle is that the lower your growing temperature, the lower the humidity your plant needs for the same vapor pressure deficit. For example, an anthurium growing in 90 degrees weather with a humidity of 80% in Ecuador would only have a vapor pressure deficit of 0.95. Now, growing the same plant in your home at 68 degrees at the same vapor pressure deficit of 0.95 would only require a humidity of around 58%. So this is why we can grow these plants in our home. It's because of the lower air temperature, which means lower humidity, is needed. You'll also notice that most of the time our home environment will have a drying effect on our plants. Anthuriums have relatively thin leaves to deal with the rainforest, so they lose water more quickly. So watering twice weekly helps counteract this water loss. Now, there's no debate that growing these plants at a high temperature and humidity in a greenhouse will give a nicer plant. I've had pretty good luck just growing them in my own home, and so can you. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments section, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe for future videos.